we're starting to see more regulation with them. They're changing very subtly right now what their opinions and what their transparency policies are, and what level of accountability they will hold very risky institutions to. So those changes have already been put in place. The execution date on those keeps getting moved here or there, but the idea is there. The sentiment of the institutions that will be held accountable by the United States government if there was some crazy black swan market failure event due to negligent institutions just being crazy with their trades, ego trading essentially, then those people will be held accountable and they will be liquidated.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Chatter. Today I'm talking to William Steele, also known as Bill Steele, the co-founder of the Stonk News Network, or the Stonks News Network, is it? And a science fiction novelist based out of Texas. So how are you? Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you very much for having me, Josh. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. So before I start, I have to plug two things real quick. I have to plug, first of all, my book, which has been out for a month now. It's called Brexit, the Establishment Civil War. It's basically a case study of how social media is destroying our democracy. So, you know, that's a real fun topic. People go check it out. The link is in the description below. And also, given that we're going to spend, I'd say, a reasonable amount of time talking about GameStop, my friend and I made a whole bunch of t-shirts and put them on Teespring in order to fund buying more GME stock. So if you want to get one of those, I will put the link in the description below as well. So before we were talking there, you mentioned that you're about 10 miles from, or 10 minutes from the Mexico border, and the exciting things are happening in Texas right now because of SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, Elon Musk. Do you want to tell me why you're so excited about the area before we get into the financial nitty-gritty?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm in an area, I'm currently stationed, and Stonk News Network is out of Harlingen, Texas. We're part of a kind of tri-city area known as the Rio Grande Valley. So shout out to all the people from the 956. It's a very interesting area because SpaceX is here now. With the dynamic of coronavirus, one of the biggest tourist attractions we had, as everyone probably knows, is South Padre Island, where everyone comes during spring break to get like super wasty. It's really exciting because SpaceX is pouring. Elon Musk just announced a couple of days ago, he's putting, $30 million into Cameron County education system to attract a nicer area, because a lot of people don't know, we don't have very much money here. This is not one of the wealthier areas of the United States. I don't know why. It's wonderful. The weather's great. It's warm all year. It's a tropical climate. We're right by the beach. He's pumping a bunch of money into the economy. We're starting to see a growth in the education, which is huge because it'll attract, bigger families, engineers. That's kind of what his goal was. And he's helping to really revamp and restructure how the economy, not all of it, but some of it works down here, and kind of, shedding some light onto, what's going on politically down here, and helping to, make the Rio Grande Valley a better place. So it's a really exciting thing. Real estate's getting, nice and juicy for all my commercial and residential guys in the area. It's a beautiful place.
Yeah, I mean, Texas has also got they're a lot more open and have been for quite a while than a number of other states. So it's got to be like an exciting place to be at the minute. It feels like every time I listen to any podcaster or anyone involved in creative industries of any form, they're all talking about Texas, which is weird. I mean, you got Joe Rogan arrived in Austin 6 months ago, something like that, and then since then he's been really pushing it, and he's like trying to convince people to come. It seems like it's going to be the new California.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people are suspecting. I know Austin, for those that don't know, it's becoming one of the biggest music hubs in the world. So it's attracting a ton of artists. We got guys, Post Malone, claims Austin is home. Matthew McConaughey is really heavily back in town out with the Longhorns. There's a lot of it's getting crazy. There's a lot of Hollywood getting mixed in Texas. There's a lot of music artists getting mixed in Texas. And it makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. I mean, I can say a big reason why I believe SpaceX would have come down here is the security purposes. We're not on either of the coastal areas. We're dead smack center kind of in the continent of North America, right? Really at this point. It's a big, huge state, and there's a ton of land. So for all my, again, real estate investors out there, there is so much land out here in South Texas. You can't chuck a stick without hitting, a couple hundred acres for prices that you really just can't beat.
I mean, I'm already planning my exit to some sort of red state when if Europe just goes under. So maybe I need to look at Texas.
Sure, man. Definitely. Yeah, that's the thing too. I know Joe Rogan's talked about it, but like if you come to Texas, we do things a certain way here.
You see, the only problem is I need a green card or some sort of work permit or a job, and that's difficult to get before, like if you're coming from outside of America. Like I tried before when I was like, this is totally off topic, but who cares? When I was 15, I was like, or 16, I was working in a restaurant, and this I just got talking to this guy who owned like a whole string of restaurants in New York, and he was like, yeah, you seem fun, you should come out and work for me for the summer. So I like looked into trying to do it, and it seems like the American visa system essentially works like you need a visa to get a job, but you need a job to get a visa.
Oh, that's hilarious. I know I've heard it's pretty difficult. The only way that I've heard it's like a little bit easier is school. That's the only thing that I've because in my experience, I've only ever met illegal migrant workers or, my friends that were at university with me. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not too familiar, and I'm definitely going to take a look into that. I know, we got Joe Biden in office, so it might get a little easier.
It's true. Open borders and whatnot. You never know. Yep. So we are here to talk mainly about GameStop. So over the last 3 months or so, since I first got whispers of this thing that was happening, I don't know quite how to describe it yet. I've been doing quite a lot of writing and research and work, and essentially trying to figure out how real it is, because on one side you've either got the most outrageous, egregious, blatant case of stock market manipulation, of fraud, of non-enforcement of rules from the SEC, from willful blindness or I don't know, corruption for whatever reason. You've got the media pumping constantly this idea that GameStop is done, until the tide seems to be turning a little bit. But there's a fantastic quote actually I read from a dude on Reddit, and it really stuck with me. And it said, "No one in the media in my trading history has ever cared or warned me I'm going to lose big money. On the eve of Bear Stearns' collapse," that's in 2008, for anyone who doesn't know, they were one of the first big banks to go down, "they were still telling us to buy." So you've got that side, and either we're seeing this horrendous manipulation and fraud, or we're seeing, as I mentioned before we started, the most insane case of internet groupthink that has ever been seen in the history of the internet. Aside from perhaps QAnon or I don't know, the lizard people and David Icke. You have to go that crazy to because if these people are wrong, right? Say all of Reddit and the massive hive mind that it is, and r/Wall Street Bets New or r/GME or any of the subreddits or the discords or any of these forums, everyone seems just sure that this is a thing, that there was an outrageous amount of shorting that went on, and then after that we'll get into the details of the fuckery basically that has gone on allegedly over the past couple of months. So why do you believe that it isn't a case of groupthink?
I would have to start with saying that there's too much information available now for it to just be groupthink, and there's too much support from multiple angles. And I'll start with this. Whenever there is not billions, but like trillions of dollars involved in something, I argue that nothing is off the table. So there is nothing off the table when dealing with the volumes of money in something as big as, the United States stock market. And the players involved are massive. They're, every kind of bank that is in the United States, we have financial institutions that are global. And it's, of course, the US stock market is not just US individual money. It's the world. The world is involved in our market. So it's not a case of groupthink, in my opinion. And it's because there has been not just heavy media attention on it, but heavy regular American and, regular global citizen attention on this idea. And I think personally, this has been a long time coming. I think that the amount of kind of shadow work, I hate to use that term, but how the stock market has been kept a very complicated idea and, something you need to refer to a broker for, you need somebody to be an intermediary for your money when you're getting in the stock market. That's how everyone has played the game, kind of up until the new retail investor revolution, until it was made very easy. The barrier of entry was trading fees. So when they removed trading fees and they allowed retail investors to not just place, move money for essentially for zero fees, but what happened was there was all of the barrier of entries were removed for individuals to come together as a group and freely share information about what they believe is going on in the stock market and make very, very convincing cases. So there were just a bunch of really convincing case arguments. And the example is, kind of like the Lord and Savior of Wall Street Bets, Roaring Kitty. He went on and made a bunch of statements and claims on why he believes GameStop was such a good case, and left it up to individuals to decide whether or not the conviction was strong enough to place their money, place their bet, and what we're seeing now as an after effect of the GameStop gamma squeeze is incredible. So I saw 2 days ago, we were kind of discussing about earlier about the CNBC spotlight on what's going on with Archegos or
Archegos.
Yeah, Archegos, that particular fund who was using trade swaps to essentially create a synthetic short position. Now, for those who don't know what a synthetic short position is, we'll start back with what a short position is. A short position is essentially where you take and buy a contract that allows you to borrow shares from a brokerage, and you're borrowing on a bet or a position that stock price will go down so that you can make a profit. To keep things very simple, that's what it is. You're betting on a stock price going down for whatever reasons. It could be because you think that the company's not good, the market you think is just going to tank for some reason, whatever the case is. And with this, it is a declared position. So your short position is made known, and not just individuals like retail investors like you and I can take short positions, but massive institutions can take short positions. And the effects of a huge short position on a particular stock creates sentiment in the market, or creates a general feeling for what that stock might do. Because again, all of these are numbers that we can see and measure on different trading platforms. So when you look at all these graphs and all of this metrics and data, you're thinking, when you see a huge short position or a huge, what we call short interest on a particular stock, we think, oh man, that company, the general sentiment is that company's going to do bad. Man, that creates perception of the price. So that is declared situation. So that is a public information you and I can both access. There are plenty of creative mechanisms that these institutions have made and keep in their arsenal for situations where they don't want the public, for it to be as direct for the public to know that there is a large short position on a particular company or a particular stock price. And on a particular security, and this has come to light, and CNBC, which is a mainstream media outlet, was covering this in a piece that I saw 2 days ago, which I found very interesting because it's a totally different side. It shows where the media is going with this now, which is a very unusual thing in my opinion. So they essentially discussed openly on a major news platform the fact that large institutions can use creative strategies to create a synthetic short or create a position using banks and using a couple of other different means, trade swaps, and that this is what a lot of people on Reddit are calling like the whole dark pools phenomenon. They're kind of all lumped into the same thing, in my opinion. They're creative strategies that institutions use to make their positions not transparent in the marketplace, which, in my opinion, it should be super illegal, because the one reason that we have something like the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, is to hold all parties, no matter the size of what kind of money they have, no matter what history they have in the marketplace, accountable for what they're doing in the marketplace. In order for a game to be played fair, all of the rules need to be created in such a way that it makes the game fair. So the rules currently are not built solidly enough or not outlined in a good enough way for the game to be considered fair, in my opinion. And this is also the opinion of someone that, if you don't know about, you should definitely check out, the CEO of Better Markets, Dennis Keller. And he has spent almost arguably like a career dedicated to this one subject. So he has a lot of really great creative strategies, and he essentially has a solution for this problem that he's advocating for, that is already made, that just needs to get pushed through and the SEC needs to essentially enact it. And this would hold all these institutions accountable for these positions that we can't see, and money being moved in ways that is very, very difficult to draw the lines from the numbers. Because if you don't know, you could get lost in numbers in the stock market. You can get lost. I mean, it can drive some people, into an institution. I'm not talking a financial one. So the amount of numbers is insane. But there's a lot of really incredible information being hidden in these numbers that if you have no this is where the term knowledge is power comes from. If you're not privy to the knowledge, you can only see, a good metaphor is the chessboard, right? Is a full-size chessboard, but you can only see 4 squares in the middle. Everything else is dark. So in order for everything to be, lit up, there needs to be rules and regulations in place that allow for the board to be seen very clearly and to have a very good understanding of what's going on in the market. So what we're seeing here is potentially the beginning of what I believe, and I'm an optimist, to be the transition to an actually transparent marketplace, for the United States stock market. And I would argue, once they set the precedents, the only other potential countries that might not abide by it would be, in my opinion, Russia and China. Of course, we all definitely know that the Chinese are not known for their transparency. No. Yeah, but there's a ton of change and indicators, in my opinion, that is happening right now in real time before our eyes, which is really, really exciting. Because you asked me if I believe that if it came down to it, would Congress side on the American people's, and the people that trade in the market's behalf? And I have to say right now, even being an optimist, I don't believe so. I'm a realist in that situation. We saw it happen in 2008, and we are, probably going to see it happen again. But in this instance, if things continue to go the way they're going, and there is, more blatant, synthetic short positions, when these margin calls happen, and the direct impacts when these institutions can't keep what's going on hidden any longer. And of course, I am a firm believer that truth will come to light and it will push its way through. When those things happen, and however those manifestations of, manipulation become obvious, we will see reform, and it probably will be slow, but it will be reform in the direction of putting money and wealth back into the hands of the people. And that's what I believe is going to be the result of all of this. What we're seeing now is the ability for, as information is traded so much faster in the world that we live in, we're also seeing the same thing happen with everything. Technology is just amplifying everything. And so the rate of information that's being exchanged is going up so much faster all the time. And the amount of money that's changing hands has only gotten faster. And we're starting to now also see that in what I believe has been one of the biggest placed barriers is wealth coming from large institutions to the hands of the middle class and to the working individuals in the United States. It's always been difficult for that move to happen very quickly, but I think we're starting to see that very much now with GameStop. GameStop made a ton of young millionaires. It made, there are guys that I know that bought homes and, they're retired and they're like 27 years old, man. They're not working anymore because they got ahead of GameStop. And now all of these individuals, and these are just from my circle of friends, that they're now sitting thinking, okay, we have this money. How do we continue to do this to the institute? How do we continue to keep the market in true check? How do we continue to balance the market so that it is a fair place? And it starts with information flow and, putting your money where your mouth is. And an example would be holding the line, having diamond hands, having the faith that's necessary, being educated enough to take a position on something and to know that what you're doing, of course, you want to make money, bottom line, and always do what's best for you as any kind of investor in any situation. But if some of my friends have these positions and they're like, I'm just never going to take it out because they don't know what's actually going on with these synthetic shorts and these short positions. So they're just like, I'm just going to leave it in and until something happens, until these individuals that are in these short positions are so far in the hole that they go bust. And so what going bust looks like will be, again, the future will determine. There's a lot of exciting things that are going to happen, not just in the next 5 years. I'm talking 3 to 6 months. We're watching stuff come out on a weekly basis. So from the GameStop gamma squeeze, we're starting to see crazy stuff with AMC. And, we saw that fund recently get that margin and just got the insane squeeze of a lifetime put out on them, Yeah. And Melvin Capital, we've seen institutions that are crumbling.
Yeah, the figure that was thrown around. Now, again, I'm not sure how accurate this is, but they'd been hedge funds had been estimated to have lost 60 to 70 billion in January because of this, which is a phenomenal amount of money. And people talk about GameStop already. They talk about the future of okay, so when the squeeze is squoze, when it really happens, that it's going to be the largest top-down wealth transfer in the history of the world. But you almost argue that we've already seen that with what happened in January and the hedge funds losing 70 billion, because the 70 billion didn't just evaporate. It ended up in the pockets of people like Roaring Kitty, and people who got in there early. And it's really curious or I find it really interesting that you think that we're going to see this level of transparency start to appear, because to me it appears that we've reached this point where the internet has become I thought that maybe 10 years ago that we'd already seen the digital disruption that you were going to get from the internet or from tech through these new internet banks popping up and just platforms allowing people to trade and cryptos and just I thought we'd seen the disruption already and that was kind of done for retail, that was done for finance, that finance had been disrupted and then once again subsumed by the large institutions. But now we're witnessing this almost battle, and something that Keith Gill, Deep Fucking Value, Roaring Kitty, whatever you want to call him, said in his testimony before Congress during the first hearing was that all of the people who were testifying, Vlad or Gabriel Plotkin or any of them, they were 100% sitting there with 10 people behind the camera telling them what to say, how to react. They would have scripted their answers to things. They will have prepared them. They will have coached them. And he was just sitting there, like, sharing his opinion, his thoughts based on his research for people to deal with. And it feels like we've almost got this like huge hive mind that has suddenly like come alive because of the information that is available. Obviously, there's a lot of sort of numbers, like as you said, that the numbers could drive you crazy, and it's incredibly complex, and for a reason as well. It's, you know, it keeps out the regular person, and we're seeing this like really weird like moment where the internet.
I can tell you, I actually. Let me stop you right there, Josh. That's beautiful, because you're starting to get to what is my bread and butter. This is the most exciting aspect of everything, because we're starting to draw what we're starting to see now, because there's such a heightened level of awareness in the regular individual about everything that's going on in the world. Initially, I believe that cool off period you were talking about, when you thought that the disruption was over, that things settled. It's kind of like a stock price. It goes up, you know, there's a new catalyst, it goes up, and then it cooled off. And then all of a sudden, GME, Reddit, Wall Street Bets, AMC, boom, shorts again, it's blasting off. But that stock, that measurement, that graph is actually human awareness. So in my opinion, and again, this is the basis of which I wrote my first science fiction novel, The Spark, out of. It's a book that follows the growth of another sentient apex species in another dimension, from nomadic, egalitarian, harmonic, magic practicing people into sedentary, capitalist, artificially sentient, immortal people. And the growth from those positions and the transition in those eras, and the effects on consciousness, and the different cues and indicators that were very much relevant to what we're seeing today. And this is where I get into bigger, you know, in my series, Beyond the Light, I actually present my theory of cyclical consciousness. I give my proposal as to why the Big Bang happened and why it will continue to happen again and again. I give a bunch of really interesting dialogue about what it's like to participate as an individual with a sentient mind, and what it's like for groups of sentient minds to participate together, and what some of the confusing aspects to that interaction might be, and how to essentially, you know, confront, or maybe I propose ways that I would confront it. With what is going on in the financial market, we're starting to see a manifestation of people who are aware that things are not right. And this is, again, for a long time, it's great for people, the hippie revolution. In the 70s, we saw these people that were like, you know, we don't want to do these things. We're not going to be controlled. Our perception is not going to, you know, we're not, no to Vietnam, peace, love, happiness. But they weren't affecting what fuels the world going round, which is what we all talk about. What makes the world go round? Money. And now with our generation, with these individuals who are so privy and so good with, I mean, I've seen people that can use phones way better than me, and that can use the internet way better than me, that can use these different mechanisms of relaying information in a way to get a message across to thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people very quickly, within days. That's that for an individual to be able to do that, that's never been had before. So what we're seeing is the perfect melting environment for mass, what I call a group, the mass consciousness, for its true subconscious of the whole hive mind. There is a hive mind. There is very much so a connection between all living organisms. And what we've always seen in storytelling, what we've always seen since one of the greatest storybooks, in my opinion, of all time. It also has some really great, you know, motifs, the Bible. It's always this battle between good and evil, the yin and the yang, the light and the dark, the male and the female, the one and the zero. We're always seeing these dichotomies that it seems like there's the dueling nature of the two hemispheres of the mind, the creative and the logical. We see this occur over and over and over again. And what we're starting to see now is the manifestation of that on a very big scale. So the suppression that has been had of what's been going on financially for the middle class is something that's been going on for a while. And this is the manifestation of us pushing through that and breaking past that suppressive barrier, and now having to shed light on what has been dark for so long. And all of these things are coming out. And now there has to be, because the accountability that the internet provides, there has to be change, or we as a group will do what we've always done to tyrannical leaders, and we will go into their castle, rip them out, and be like, all right, you're done.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not 100% what form that revolution takes in the 21st century, but I think you're 100% right that this is what we're approaching. Because Elon Musk, I think, mentioned one of his appearances on the Joe Rogan Experience was that, like, we're already cyborgs. We are essentially like, our phone is like this, like, it turned us into a cyborg that's like helping us plug in to the hive mind, as we've called it. And I think what we're witnessing in a lot of stuff, which speaks to what you said about technology and the internet just amplifying everything, is we're seeing this last 10, 12 years since the internet really entered everyone's lives, like in the way it has, is like breaking through this barrier of providing people with so much information that we don't quite know what to do with in some cases. And it's something that Tim Dillon, actually the comedian, talks about when he talks about QAnon, because he says, look, these people have just discovered that there was some like pedophiles who were working in government. And then they just get all this information that they knew or that was out there, and suddenly their mind gets blown, and they've no idea what to believe anymore. They've no idea what's true, and they're just suffering from this like information overload. And I think the same thing happens with like the hyper woke people when they discover that, yeah, your nation did some really, 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 really fucked up shit. Like, history is awful. It is full of murderous, brutal dictators, of horrible stories of people doing the most unimaginably cruel things ever. And you discover this, and then you, like, of course you can lose your mind as soon as if you've just gone through thinking, oh, America's great or Britain is fantastic, and then all of a sudden you like get to 17, 18, 25, and you discover that, we committed genocide in some places, arguably, and we brutally murdered people. We were fine with the slave trade. There's so many horrible things, and it's this case of like information overload, and I see it happening online as well with the GameStop thing, because there's so much information about what's going on that people just, and I'm struggling with this as well. I do not know what to believe. I don't know like who's right, what analysis is correct, like who's pulling numbers out of their ass and drawing connections that aren't there. And it feels like this might be the moment where the hive mind has actually figured it out. And maybe.
Yeah. I agree. So you're very correct. If we're not figuring it out, the big boat in the ocean is now steering itself through that collective consciousness toward the right direction. We're at least going the right direction. We're shedding light. We're being what I love is we're being fearless and taking a stand and taking a literal and metaphorical position. It's hilarious. It's so hilarious. The language that's used in the stock market is so beautiful and eloquent for the situation that's going on what is going on with the way that things are being handled in the interaction of the financial institutions, the government, big banks, and the United States and everyone that trades in the U.S. stock market. But I would have to say we're headed the right direction. If the mechanisms, that's what, again, we at my co-founder, Omar Sharif, and I, that's why we founded the Stonk News Network, because we said, okay, what can we do to help facilitate, because you said it earlier, what can we do to help facilitate this revolution, this change? How can we be a catalyst? How can we add and contribute to society? We can create very entertaining and informative pieces that help to educate an individual, because you said it earlier, it becomes so difficult with this like sheer volume of information. It like makes your stomach nauseous thinking about what all is out there. I mean, I love that Twitter is such a great platform for very big celebrities like, you know, Elon Musk, Matthew McConaughey to use. But man, I open Twitter sometimes and I'm like, I don't even know how to use this thing the right way. Like I'm looking at this, just tweets, just so much information that it makes me like swipe up, I'm done. I'm just going to post a tweet and then get off. That's it. It's like that, but for everything. So what we can do as individuals that have the time, and I'm speaking for you, myself, Omar, people that talk and have discussions that are, you know, kind of in the media area, is provide very well put together pieces of content and provide very poignant, very aware bits of information to because if you do it in that nature, in that light, the world will find you. That's just how we work as a group. That's how this whole hive mind mentality has been working. If you create from a place of earnest, like genuine care and love for what is going on in your society in change for something better, the world will find you. It's only a matter of time. It's been proven throughout time. We have great authors and great poets and great individuals in our history that had these amazing works that really do shed light and shed great value to human collective consciousness and psychology, that, you know, even if they weren't found during their lifetime, they were found after, and they were revered and they were shared and they were spread, you know, amongst academia and amongst the intellectual communities. So it will be found. Your job is to create with that honesty, with that transparency, with that intent, and do it the best you possibly can. That's what I found would be a great role for what me and Omar have allocated to this. We've created a company for it so that the organization has one intent, and that is to fuel the retail investor revolution and to become the central information source for the retail investor. And that is a combination of a lot of things. It's education, because like you said earlier, it's so overwhelming. How do you deal with it? Well, it helps a lot if you have foundational principles that are, you know, both time tested and group tested, that are peer tested. That's why in academia we have peer reviewed studies. You know, you can't just make a claim that this is the way you got to look at the world. You got to tell it to the world, and then the world validates you. So that's what you want to, that's what we want to do. And that's how we help with, essentially you put your parameters in place. And so my background in post-secondary studies, so college and university, was computer science and applied mathematics. And with that, I was very, very blessed, that some might say, or, you know, very, very fortunate to get a good understanding of the essence of computers. And so there's a lot, if you look into it, a lot to find out, and a lot of really beautiful parallels in the way that the human mind works, the way that logic works, and all of these different things. All of that to essentially say, you put a solid framework in place for any kind of thinking computing machine, be it a machine program, be it artificial intelligence software, or one of the greatest, you know, computing softwares ever, the biological software of the human mind. You put good foundational frameworks in place for them to analyze and interpret information and to become more efficient at doing that over time. That is what AI does. If we as humans adopted a little bit more and learned a little bit more from our artificial, you know, programs that we're creating, and we looked at when we're analyzing something like information about financial institutions, information about the stock market, if we looked at it through that lens with a little bit less emotion and a little bit more of an analytical mind from the right framework, it becomes a lot less stressful. It becomes a lot easier and a lot less intimidating. It makes you want to wake up in the morning because you're like, okay, another day that I get to, you know, apply some principles, learn more about the world around me, and take part in what's going on with this change. That's exciting. That makes me want to get up. You know, one of the things I think that we struggle with, and why the entertainment sector is so big right now, is we love escaping. We love escaping. And it's not a bad thing, because even in these escapes, they're constructs of our human imagination. So they still have trace elements of what's going on in objective reality. That's why great storytelling is so I believe one of the biggest impacts that you can have on the world is to tell a great story. If you tell a great story so that someone can leave their current reality, escape, and go into a place and experience something new and fun, and at the same time, maybe get something away from it, whether they were aware of it or not, because everyone has that experience. You watch a movie as a kid, and when you watch it again, like 20 years later, you're like, oh my gosh, I missed everything. And
Yeah.
that feeling is very much so what I believe the essence of a great story is. And you can have such a great impact because, you'll watch that story and not only will it connect with that sense of nostalgia and, reverence for your childhood and where you were at then, but now the impact and the reflection you have that day. I've seen great films, change my course in life. I've had a couple of movies that I watched that really, really made me think like, man, there's something maybe to math that I wasn't seeing in elementary school, wasn't seeing in junior high, wasn't seeing in high school. I should give it a shot in college. And it gave me, mechanisms of thinking, ways of interpreting information that have become foundational to the way that I go out and interact with the world now. So that's just one example of a story. There's tons of other ways I'm sure that they impact people's lives. And all of that to say is, if we help people to entertain them, so escape, because people are going to, it's a healthy part of, the way that we interact with the world. They're going to take part in these forms of escapism. But if that form of escapism can also be something that is very potent and very powerful to connect you again to maybe taking action and taking a stand or a position or whatever the case is, then as creators, we've done our job. As members of a collective society where we're all participating in, we're doing our job to help each other, because that's really what it's about. We don't have anyone else but each other right now. That's the thing that that I've found is very valuable in walking around and holding in my heart is like, okay, everyone that I'm interacting with, there is a way for me to reach their lives. And it's through this.
Yeah.
It's right here. It's what we're doing here on this podcast. There's ways that we can impact people, and these mechanisms are already there. They're being deployed by individuals and institutions, whether they're doing it intentionally or not is an argument, but they're being deployed in a negative way. There is a big negative force deploying these mechanisms to put the collective sense of consciousness and attention of humans on things that are truly not valuable. And so it's been a very interesting fight, which is what we're watching in the financial sector, to see how the transition of attention on things that are irrelevant and are not edifying to the individuals and to the collective society slowly make that steer to where there's a lot of attention on GameStop. There's a lot of attention on AMC. There's a lot of attention on these insane things going on in sectors that actually matter, that impact the rates that you get mortgages at, that impact retirements for our elderly, for the people that have contributed to our society, built our society, our predecessors. It impacts them. It impacts generational wealth. The reaches of this impact are so far reaching. You could write an entire, you could spend a lifetime creating the scenarios in which it impacts people. That's how far it goes.
So I want to get a little bit abstract here, but I think we've already crossed that bridge, so it's fine. So something you mentioned there about escapism and about the way people like you to construct stories based on our imagination and our reality that we then inhabit to get away from things is like that when people create structure, whether that is the structure of a fictional world or whether that's the structure of how a market, like a stock market, is meant to work, is that we all tend to start with this idea that that's how it is, that the rules are there and that's how the game is played, or this is the world that you inhabit in this is the fictional world that these characters inhabit. And then when those rules get broken, or when the breaking of those rules, when that kind of world gets shattered a little bit, people get really viscerally angry.
Yep.
For example,
that is an evolutionary inheritance.
And
Continue,
like,
continue.
there's two examples that spring to mind from fiction, and it's the first one is Game of Thrones. They created this beautiful, fantastic world, and George R. R. Martin created this fantasy world that was brilliant. I think not because it was creative and brilliantly written, which it is. The conversations are fantastic, but the reason it succeeded is because they had the characters were so well defined, and the actions provided consequences for your heroes. You didn't know, like, if they made a bad decision, they might die because they've made a bad decision. And when that, like, fear or that was kind of removed in seasons 7 and 8, where you know, characters would make stupid decisions and be fine, or they had like serious plot armor, like suddenly people got real angry at the fact that the world that had been created had been shattered. The same thing happened in Star Wars, where when Leia in the Last Jedi, when she gets killed, and then all of a sudden she's magically like more powerful than any person we've seen in like Star Wars like cinema. Maybe not the expanded universe, but she just sort of Mary Poppins flies after being murdered, and you're just like, come on, man. Like, I remember like myself getting really angry, and you can see the same anger happen in the stock market, where people will go through like due diligence and explain the rules, explain how things are meant to happen, explain what the system is meant to be based on. And then when we see that might all be fraudulent and just based on nothing, like, people get angry, and they get to that point where they will happily express the opinion, and this is a very widely held and expressed opinion on Reddit and on Discords, is that, like, screw the hedge funds. Like, I will lose my entire investment if it brings them down. Is the people like, if the rules turn out and the
kamikazing these institutions, man.
Yeah, like, if the game turns out to be false, then people get really angry at the game and they will just want to tear it all down. Mm-hmm. It's terrifying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is, and it's. So that opinion is something that is very interesting. It's very interesting, to say the least. As to I read a post that was like, this guy, he posted, and he was like, I'm an electrical engineer. The post title was, you think that losing scares me, comma, I've been losing all my life. And this guy was like, this is why I became an electrical engineer, was because I knew that I would be invaluable to society. So I could take all of my paycheck. He said, I'm single. I got one cat. I'll pump every single last dollar of my paycheck into GME until I die, if that's what it means to take you guys down. And I saw like it was like a page long, man. This guy spent a large section of his day dedicated to expressing this post and this sentiment. And I find it fascinating.
There's been so much of that opinion expressed. I've seen like pictures of people who like they're like, I've lost my girlfriend, I've lost my flat, I'm living in a tent beside my car, but I'm still holding. And I was just like, we have lost our collective minds. Like, because, you know, I like, fair play to the guy. Like, those are some serious diamond hands. But yeah, but the fact that we're at this moment where people are willing to just say, like, screw you. Like, there was one post, and I think it was like mid-January it went up. It was a guy who was like, look, my father's construction company went under in 2008 because of your reckless gambling, because of your literal just gambling with everyone's mortgages and the entire US housing market and the world economy ultimately. And he's like, look, you people have no idea how much that broke my family. You think I'm not willing to go a bit broke at the possibility of revenge?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's potent. It's 100% potent. And it's true, because a lot of these individuals have reason to be angry. There is reason to justify anger in this situation from the perspective of retail investors. There is. Now, in the instance of the guy that lost his girlfriend flat and is sitting in the tent, this is where we gotta educate on like some level of, self-control parameters. That's some serious diamond hands, man. But I'm saying, like, maybe liquidate a little bit so you can stay in take a hot shower. There's just it is almost it's irrational in some circumstances. And so this is where I also caution anyone reading the internet, the amount of I'd be curious to see if this guy like was posting his entire journey, like video wise, because the danger of the internet. And it's also, again, this is a caution to everyone that has never been on Reddit, that here's the podcast and then gets on Reddit.
This is not financial advice.
Yeah, this is not always not financial advice, entertainment purposes only. But be careful about what you read and who, take everything in the world that you can't see directly with a grain of salt. Always. And that's just safe internet practice. That's something that I think we need to make sure we educate like preschoolers and first graders and second graders as they continue to get into life. There's a lot of people out there, and one thing is a reality stranger than fiction. You'll see some insane circumstances in life develop out, and you want to just take things with a grain of salt because you don't want to use any information that is misinformed to make a calculated decision in your life.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. That's a great way of putting it. Now, there's a few things that like I want to try and get into, because I'm keen to get your kind of explanations perhaps on some of the terms and phenomena that we've seen and claims that we've seen based around like some of the more complex financial instruments. Now, there's a lot of there's so many terms being thrown around and different, just huge complex concepts, and I'm trying to like get a grasp on what X, Y, and Z means, and like you read a due diligence is just peppered with stuff. So like, why don't we start with something simple? So what is sell? What does that mean?
You mean just like the term sell?
Yeah. I've never heard it. I only know buy and hold.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
No, I'm messing around. I said to my friend I would do that. One of the things that I've seen talked about is that the hedge funds were hiding shorts in ETFs. And yep. I spoke to Lily Frankus, and she runs the Nope chart, which is like an analysis of the market based on like options. Don't ask me to explain what it is, but she essentially told me that the idea that hedge funds could hide shorts with ETFs was just not true. And I've seen people say that it is true. Like, what do you make of that, like, suggestion?
So I will say this. She said that institutions cannot hide short positions, taking short positions, or essentially be transparent. This is what it is. It's all about transparency. She said that there cannot be transparency using the mechanism of an ETF. Maybe, maybe not. There's a higher question to be asked about all of it. And that question is quite simply this. Are there creative mechanisms for large financial institutions to not be transparent about their positions in the market? And there is a very clear and very resounding answer to this, and that is yes. There are plenty of creative, and if there aren't a plenty now, I can guarantee you that with the amount of resources that these institutions have and the amount of intellectuals out there in the world, very smart individuals far smarter about the stock market than me, that have decades of experience, combine that with lawyers and creative politicians and lobbying, you throw all that in one mix. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that enough money buys a creative mechanism for you to not be transparent with where you're at in the current landscape of the market. That is without a doubt 100% the case. Yes. And there was a really good Ask Me Anything with the CEO of Better Markets. I think we mentioned him a couple of times, Dennis Keller, and he again, is a very big authority that I recommend people check out the Better Markets website, because very plainly on the front page, they have a ton of great information that if you have the time to read and you prefer reading, then there's a lot of really good information to be dug out there, where they describe the fact that that is the current situation, that institutions don't have to be transparent. But even bigger and even better is he provides his package solution that he and his company and other individuals that are for Main Street, the retail investor, the working class of America, to help us to gain insight into what is actually going on in the market, to set new parameters on how financial institutions have to interact with taking positions and moving money, and how they behave with banks. Because that's another thing that a lot of people, that's really coming to light with the current big fund that really got crushed by that margin call. The interaction. Yeah. Say it again.
I think it's Archegos. I think
Archegos. Yeah. I can't pronounce it either. That institution, the way that they interacted with big banks like Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Deutsche, all these banks, they essentially allowed them to create what we call a synthetic short position through using like mechanisms like trade swaps. So that was that's allowed. That's not what it is. It's not allowed. It's not allowed. It's not restricted is the more clearly logical correct of stating these things. And as people continue to get more involved in the stock market and they get a better, more rudimentary understanding of why legislation is important and why the SEC exists and why they're sitting on their hands, and they have been for a long time, and why they're incentivized, obviously, to do so, it becomes a lot clearer, and it becomes very clear that I would have to maybe not directly disagree with what was her name?
Lily Frankus. I'll put the link in the description if anyone wants to check out the conversation.
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna check that out after this. I would definitely say I have to not directly disagree with her, because it might not be that direct mechanism. ETFs might not be the exact way that they do it, but I would, on a larger question, want to ask her, are there creative pathways? And I'm confident if she knows the industry, she's been around it for a while, she would have to agree and say yes, but I don't want to put words in her mouth.
So how did we get to this point where this level of opacity is just sort of accepted? The 2008 crash was meant to be this moment where we suddenly realized how fraudulent banking was and how they're all crooks, and that they are willing to just the whole thing with the 2008 crash, and the Big Short does a fantastic job of actually explaining what happened. And it wasn't just like a few banks taking risks. It was the entire system all complicitly together deciding that they were either going to ignore risks, or they were just going to rubber stamp things. Or there's that scene where Mark Baums goes to the ratings agency, and she just goes, well, if we don't give them the AAA, they'll just go straight down the street to Moody's. And you're like, wow, they're all just, it's
fine. She was wearing the really dark glasses because she had eye surgery. I love that. Whoever directed that did a great job. They're blind. They're blind by money. That's what it is. Plain and simple. They see, it's like, what's the best way to put it? When there's a big bright light shown on a very glamorous object, and you're just kind of blinded, you're stunned, and you're just petrified by beauty, essentially, of the allure of what you could be. You don't see that it might be sitting on a giant pile of dog crap. Because you're blind, you can't see it. And so that's what happened in that instance. And that's what that is a cycle that, if you look at human history, has repeated countless times and time again. You bite off more than you can chew, and you're not assessing. This term is pretty common in the financial market. You're not assessing risk logically. You're emotionally now fixated on the idea of making a crud ton of money, which is what happened. Before 2008, there were people like in the Big Short does a great job, man. They were buying multiple homes. People were taking, $100 million bonus checks. Institutions were making hand over fist record numbers. until they don't. And ultimately, who does the weight of that burden really fall on? It falls on the majority, which in this case is not financial institutions. It's the working class, people. It was the backbone of America.
Yeah, well, it was the taxpayer money that bailed them out ultimately. The next thing I'm curious to get onto is, like, there's been over the last couple of months, there's been a lot of accusations. I'm trying to compile as many of them as I can of like shills on Reddit, like spreading FUD. That the joke is that it's like a whole bunch of hedge fund interns just being whipped by their bosses to buy Reddit accounts and go on and tell everyone to sell. And the story of what people believe the shills are saying just by itself is fascinating. Like, everyone is like, no one knows who's real, no one can tell who's spreading FUD, who's being like a I don't know, who's trying to just be realistic. And the something that I was watching a fantastic podcast with Brett Weinstein and Jordan Peterson. And I can't remember if it was on which one of their shows it was on, because they did like a swap thing recently. But I got the quote here. And Jordan Peterson said, "A phenomenon that has recently emerged from the increase in online community interactions is a seeming abundance of acute paranoia. One of the causes may lie in the ability to hyper-select communities themselves. At your weakest point psychologically, you choose the least demanding compatriots, and so your craziest ideas are the least likely to be challenged." And I thought that was a fantastic assessment. And he was talking nothing to do with GameStop, but I think it speaks to this idea that the community can become like almost like hyper paranoid, like he says, that we're anything that's like questioning the narrative, like people, like someone will say, "Oh, it's a shill, it's the hedge funds." But at the same time, like right around the spike of the first peak in January, there was like a monstrous peak in Google searches about how to buy a Reddit account. So that's coming from somewhere. Like, someone is trying to get onto Reddit with accounts that seem like legitimate people, and for whatever reason, like, draw whatever conclusions you want, but that was real. So like, how paranoid do you think the community has got? Or, how accurate do you think they are in identifying people just, spreading FUD, like fear, uncertainty, doubt, if anyone doesn't know what that is?
I think I would say incredibly, because what's at stake here? People's money. Anytime people's money are at stake, what's the quickest way to get somebody to be like hyper protective mama bear mode? Mess with their money. Mess with someone's money, and you will see all of their principles hit the fan, and they come out, guns loaded, beast ready. That's anytime you mess with someone's money, that's just what happens. So I think, the Reddit community is hyper focused on finding the shills and destroying them. They're like white blood cells that just went AWOL, and they're just like eating everything, destroying everything in the system. They're like, it's like an active lysome that just like went just ham and just like, nope, you're a shill, eat. And it's a dangerous. I think it's a good thing, because what it does is the people that are wanting to challenge the potential imposters will scrutinize and look at every single word in that statement. That that's the thing about written correspondence. Your statement is very clear. There's no room for backtracking, backpedaling. It's all there. It's said. You can pick apart someone's statement very logically. So if they're not a shill, they will expound, and they will continue to have the dialogue until they get to the point of both of them acknowledging what the truth in the situation is. If they are a quote unquote shill, they're just going to keep, bashing and, sell, blah, 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 blah. I'm not a shill, but blah, 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 sell. And it will become very obvious to everyone on the forum, okay, yeah, that's definitely a shill. And the cool thing about Reddit is the up and down vote element. So it becomes a game of again, numbers. How many accounts are legitimate versus how many are not, and can you justify the legitimacy of a statement based on its upvote to downvote ratio, or even further, the context of the discussion. And one big question to ask in all this is, do you have the time? So as an individual, personally, like I love Reddit, and I love what it offers in terms of value. It's a great place, but you have to learn how to use that beast. You have to learn. There's definitely some training wheels to be had when browsing Reddit your first couple months, and as you continue to journey into it, especially with what's going on now. Because I personally would not put it past, again, if you have an abundance of resources, why not justify paying a bunch of interns, all right, guys, how can we save some tax money? Well, if we, create an internship program, hire a bunch of kids, turn it into a little sweatshop of Reddit posts, essentially, we can claim that on our taxes as funding education. And then we get all these kids who know how to use these things, because we don't, to interact with this community and to spread misinformation to hopefully better our positions. It's not an unlikely idea. It's really not. Putting myself in that situation, if I had all those resources, hey, that's a good way to justify a tax saving. That saves money for the company in the long run. And, if anything, it just slows the beast down. It's the beast of what's going on in Reddit, what's going on in information flow. But there is also one thing that I don't think anyone is looking for. And this was an interaction that I had with a few OTC companies that were, interestingly enough, trying to get me to highlight their company. Everyone out there, be very careful about promises from penny stocks and if anyone that's not AMC or GME makes this claim, I'm gonna look at them with a microscope to see what's been going on in their financial history. But anyone that is an OTC claiming that you should buy their stock, or that there is an imminent short squeeze that's going to happen to that penny stock or that OTC, be very, very careful. Be very, very, very careful. That screams to me fraud. And there is instances where I'm now finding, personally, CEOs and individuals have approached me wanting me to highlight their company, even maybe not CEOs, maybe it's the friend of a CEO, so it's not as directly traceable. There's a lot of interesting things that companies themselves are doing to try to capitalize on what happened with GameStop, because GameStop now no longer abides by fundamentals. GameStop is pretty pumped. It's got a lot of money in it now. And so there's a lot of, allure in that idea of, ooh, maybe I can be the next GameStop. Ooh, I can imagine the profits we could take if we got, viral like GameStop. That's kind of the idea that some of these companies are having. So I really encourage people, as they continue to get into the stock market, and you go from, analysis of publicly traded companies that are on, NASDAQ and that are, big companies that are vetted. Be careful venturing into the OTC and the penny stock world, because there will be a lot of bold claims from these companies. And it is a very high risk, high reward area where if you're not experienced in being able to spot fraudulent financials and just weird track records and weird claims and strange interactions with shareholder meetings, you might be you might get the veil pulled over your head and you'll lose some money.
When you see the media try and push like the next GameStop, like for example in the start of February, end of January, there was this phenomenon where I would open my phone and like the suggested news thing would just be like, oh, SLV is the next GameStop, like Redditors are abandoning GameStop for SLV, like hilariously not even silver, just SLV, like this company that's associated with silver. And then like there was, I don't know how many articles I saw talking like with this narrative. And then you like a cursory glance at Reddit front page, top post, not on Wall Street Bets, top post on Reddit was, do not buy SLV. This is the distraction. And the narrative on Reddit, at least, was that this was the hedge funds paying the media to shill for them to back up to back them up, to get people to forget GameStop so that they could cover their short positions and people would pump something else. Hilariously, Citadel, I think, were one of the top holders of the company at the time. But I was trying to parse out whether I thought that this was actually the hedge funds just calling up CNBC and MSNBC and CNN and all of the news networks or the business news networks and saying, hey, you need to get people off a GameStop. And how much of it was journalists thinking they were smart, looking for the clicks of all the people who aren't 100% invested in the GameStop story, just sort of hearing about it on the news. Oh, GameStop's going up. And then they think, oh, maybe I could make a few quid on that. And then seeing some article about the next GameStop and that they're going to click on it straight away. How much do you think it was actual influence from hedge funds on the media? And how much was it a bunch of lazy journalists trying to get clicks?
It could be a combination of all of it, right? So that's the thing. And this is where, it's difficult. It's difficult because you have to make a good judgment call, a good gut call. You have to put your finger on it. I say anything that comes out, if any mainstream media is essentially, because let me backtrack. GME was essentially a lottery ticket. Right? The first big spike when it hit $400+ a share. If you were in on it back in last September, before the media, before this was a blip on the hedge funds radar, before this was a blip on any financial institution's radar, before even GME themselves were man, we're getting an awful lot of buys right now. What's going on? That they probably didn't even know what was going on, and it's their company. No one knew about it. That's why it was so profitable. It was profitable if you were in before there were even claims on the street about it. So if a mainstream media outlet is covering it on Apple News and it's front page, I can guarantee you one thing. That stock price is not going anywhere but helping someone else that was in that position beforehand. You're late. If you are hearing about a particular ticker or particular stock, it's already too late. It's already too late unless there is some insane catalytic. There's got to be that's what we call a black swan event. There's got to be a black swan event surrounding that particular thing if the mainstream media is covering about it, and there's still enough time for you to get into a position to make significant profit. That's just period, end of story, all time. I'm 100% firmly believe that is the case. So the fact that, SLV and all that hit the mainstream, I wouldn't put it past the idea of it almost sounds funny. It's a very old school way of trying to use communications to control sentiment, okay, it sounds like a bunch of old dudes in suits sitting in a back door smoking cigars that are well, how do we get the people to not look at this anymore? Well, just show them something new and dangle some more bling in front of them, and that'll do the trick. And then they're all right, I'm going to call my friend who's going to call a friend. So that there's another thing too, is there will never be a direct link between any of these institutions and the media. It'll always be some strange pattern or some strange links of intermediaries that eventually there will be a stop guy who will be the bag holder for if that idea would ever come to light, that it would never be able to fully come to light. So these individuals have such resources that it'll be very difficult to ever trace the message getting there. But you could assume that there's probably something going on there. And again, there's also the assumption that it could just genuinely be the human system that's in place, the incentivization for journalists being that justification. So it could be one, could be the other, could be a combination of both. And there's a lot of different things that it could be. My opinion, I think personally it was probably more so journalists, being incentivized, all right, guys, or an editorialist, it's oh man, I've been on Reddit for a while. What would be a great idea is if I took a look at this particular company, or maybe he's found a Reddit post that was ooh, if I get the early bird worm on this, then, I'll hit front page, I'll get a nice bonus. Let's do it. And then, whoever heard it at the top got the perfect sales pitch for it, was this is a great idea. Let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty accurate. So before we talk a little bit about your fiction writing, like, do you have any predictions whatsoever for what you think might happen in the coming months, with maybe not specifically GameStop, but the market generally, or financial regulation, the congressional hearings? Like, what do you?
100%. I have a feeling we've already seen it. We already started to see and unpack what's going on with the DTCC, what's going on with the NSCC, and for those that don't know, these are clearinghouses. These are the people responsible for executing all of the securities and equities trading in the market. So these are the guys that are like, okay, this is what needed to happen today. We're going to release that, move this here, move that there. They're the guys that command the movement at the end of the day. We're starting to see more regulation with them. They're changing very subtly right now what their opinions and what their transparency policies are, and what level of accountability they will hold very risky institutions to. So those changes have already been put in place. The execution date on those keeps getting moved here or there, but the idea is there. The sentiment of the institutions that will be held accountable by the United States government if there was some crazy black swan market failure event due to negligent institutions just being crazy with their trades, ego trading essentially, then those people will be held accountable and they will be liquidated. So that's kind of what's going on already. I think we're going to see even more of it. I think personally, and this is again where I'm an optimist, I think as we continue down this path, and and it's really up to the people. It's always up to the people. If we continue to be aggressive in our pursuit of uncovering more information on how the market is currently being manipulated, and if we continue our pursuit and we continue to put pressure and we continue to put light and we continue to put human attention span on these ideas, it will be inevitable. Either there will be people voted out of positions of power, and again, new generations and younger politicians coming into light, stating that they will stand by these particular ideas and values, get put into house, and then put into positions and then execute what they said they would. I think we will. I think we will see change, and I think we will continue to see reform in legislation. As to how fast and how abrupt and how great the reform might be, that is only time will tell that. So we'll have to see where the pieces lay. But it's really exciting because the landscape is changing, day to day, week to week, in some circumstances, hours to hours.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing it. I mean, there's the idea of revolution coming is interesting, because I've been looking at this thing called Strauss-Howe generational theory, which was dismissed by many academics as, I think the quote is, a scientific as astrology or a Nostradamus text. But the theory basically goes that every 80 to 100 years, there is like a cycle of humanity, which actually will bring us nicely onto your book. But they suggest that there are four turnings through that thing, and there's 4 generations. So you have the high, the awakening, the unraveling, and the crisis. So the high is when everyone has, like, it's just after a crisis, everyone's super invested in the institutions that they've newly built following this crisis, whether it was previously it was World War II, and that generation that kind of fought through that and then rebuilt the institutions and like reaffirmed things. And then slowly over that time, over the next sort of 80 to 100 years, they suggest that things will people become less and less involved or less and less trustful in institutions, eventually leading to an unraveling, some sort of revolution, and like a massive crisis. And the idea right now is that we are entering that crisis. They predicted that it would be between 2020 and 2025. Hilarious, yeah. And they wrote this in 1987. So fair play to you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, right. I mean, like the obviously you can't predict what's going to happen in a generation. But I do kind of buy into the idea that we do have like cycles of humanity. I'm curious. Actually, you haven't heard that, but like it's essentially whereas the history repeats itself through cycles of generational archetypes, i.e., strong men make good times, good men make weak times. Strong men make good times make weak men make hard times make strong men. And I mean men there in like humanity, not like men.
So yeah. That's a hell of an argument. Then that's there's one thing that I've learned is being in a position of lack definitely it's either live or die. So that's what, man, it's a really great way of putting it. But evolution is a great tool. It's been what has fueled biological systems surviving or dying, and that whole idea of like surviving or dying is exactly what you can kind of pull from that exact notion. Weak men are forged in good times. So when there's plenty, when there is abundance, there is no need or requirement for there to be great innovation, great thinking, anything. I would agree to some point about the 100-year cycle. I do, however, though, believe that the individuals that wrote that in the 80s maybe did not see how much of a catalyst technology is. I think it's even quicker now. When I say technology exponentiated everything, I mean like literally everything. I mean the rate at which other species go extinct is now faster. The rate at which information flows is now faster. The rate at which we use resources faster. Like everything has been accelerated. So I think that 4th-generation thing might even be cut down to like 1 or 2. I think within like 1 or 2 lifetimes, we will experience what a lot of big shifts have occurred in the past. And I think we're heading into, and this is I get into it in my second novel. This is the next one that I've been working on. It's called The North Sentinel Island. It's the second one of the Beyond the Light series, and it follows a young man in a world that I kind of write out at around 2060, 2070, where we're under a little bit more of a global government umbrella, kind of like as if the United Nations had a little bit more influence in each superpower. And with that, he leaves and kind of runs out of society after being a programmer for the meteorology department in their kind of top secret government area. He leaves to go to the last uncivilized culture on the face of the earth, which is this little island off the coast of India, which is a real place right now. And it is currently in this situation. It's the last uncivilized society on earth. So it's a place where people still run, wild. They move nomadically. They hunt and fish on this little island, and he wants to go be a part of it. His journey into that society, after leaving, the modern kind of globalized world, and the events that occur therein, essentially, it highlights kind of that idea that difficult times make a strong man. And so in going to find identity in that world in the North Central Island, he gains the values and the principles that he learns from, living off of the land and finding a role in this warrior type society, warrior type tribe culture. And he comes back to use those values to shed light on what's going on in the globalized world under essentially, I don't want to get into it. I don't want to spoil it too much. I'll leave it at that. But the amount of evolution that takes place during that time and what happens both in the individual battles of the protagonist and the kind of globalized culture is essentially the same thing that we're facing now. It's light being shed through resilient individuals for change. Now, as to where we're headed as a world, it's a very interesting topic, because I do believe that we're headed to a much more global society. And when I say that, I mean like politically and society wise. I think eventually we should see what I believe to be the true. I believe this is the case. I think that borders should melt. I don't like the idea of borders. I never have liked the idea of borders because we're all just humans. And I know that that's like such a cliche thing to say, but it really is the truth. Since I was a child, I was a military brat. So I was fortunate enough to live in, places like South Korea, Philippines, Japan, the United States. My mother is, Mexican. My dad is, again, Irish, red hair, blue eyes, and I come from just a melting pot of essentially a modern nomad. That's what military brats are. We are forced to uproot and forced to go to new places like every year, every other year. So after having been exposed to that, I saw the same thing everywhere. Like people think, we like to think that we're just so different than each other. Like, oh man, my culture is so much better because of this, or this. And if you go to the world and you travel a little bit, you find out that like everyone does the same thing. We just like call it a different name. And so I think borders are going to melt. I think we're going to go, to some strange government umbrella, or, maybe group of like 1 to 3, always in those numbers. And it'll be very interesting to see how we handle that and how we handle currencies, because that's going to be a whole debacle that's going to have to be had. Do we go towards a globally backed gold standard? Are we going to just thrive off blockchain? Is it a combination of both? Do we want a fiat currency that's physical, or do we want a Doge fiat? Like there's so many questions, so many creative strategies that are going to have to be had by, groups of people. We're going to have to and this is, oh man, this is a great, great point. This is where we get into, when I was young, when I was around 15, 16, I had like these wonderful visions of the world, where I would just like go out and draw, because I was starting to that's when I started programming, and that's when I started getting into machine learning and deep learning algorithms. And I started to unpack a lot of things, and it really got my imagination going. Have you ever heard of the device called Flippy?
No,
it is so it's a really cool device that's used in fast food franchises to flip burgers, to make fries, to do everything at the back end of a fast food restaurant. And it really was it's the beginning of what I saw as a child. I was like, okay, well, we're going to create all this great deep learning software, great robotics, great technology. There will become a time where we will, hopefully, if we get our act together, successfully created systems so that there is an abundance of basic necessities: shelter, fresh produce, and water. If we can solve those 3 things and make it so that everyone has equal opportunity to getting these things, and we do it in such a way that is not significantly damaging to the way that the earth needs to continue to the ecosystems need to be balanced, I think that that's very doable. And I think that that's very, very doable if we really got our act together and put all of the crap aside and just focused on creating these mechanisms, we could get this done feasibly within 20 years. If we as a society united and was like, all right, guys, we're going to solve these issues together. We're going to put aside, who the burden of the financial claims come down to, who needs to be accessed, visas, all this stuff. If we put it all aside and just said, in a very Elon Musk mentality, make it as efficient a route as possible to getting the job done, cutting off the fat. If we did that, we could do that in 20 years. The technology already exists. We know how to do these things. We've created systems where we can produce, infinite amount of produce in a system where water loss is like less than 1%. And that's just the start. That's just the start of things. We could create, programs and systems to educate individuals to learn how they receive information the best way and to optimize these things. There's so much more that could be done that we're getting. I believe we are very slowly creeping to that point where we're going to have a lot of people who are going to have a lot of time. And so what happens then, it will be very interesting to watch, because I think there's a lot of different, theories on what happens when humans don't have to really do work anymore. Do we all become artists? Do we all,
I don't think that's for everyone. You see, I used to be as optimistic as you are, and I still think that we're capable of creating that system. but I cannot remember if it's Elon Musk or Sam Harris that said this, but they said that as soon as we have the technology that is capable of building that, we have to either immediately, without fault, put that to the use of the betterment of humanity, or we're fucked. Because that power will be abused for the same reason, actually, that we're seeing the hedge funds, to bring everything back full circle, react so viscerally to the prospect that they might go under.
Yep, that they're becoming obsolete.
Yeah, it's greed, and unfortunately, that's a horrendous part of human nature, but like a very real one at the same time. And I am cautiously pessimistic that we're not capable of it.
Yeah, with good reason. You know, that it's a great balance that has to be had in one's own mind of, like, you know, optimism and realism. I always strive to make, you know, a optimistic claim, and that's because if people don't even realize that door of reality exists, they will never even have the chance to peruse obtaining the key to unlocking it and going in that path. But I would agree, it's going to be a difficult road. It's it will take, you know what it will take? It will take a group of young minds that really stand for change and that are good enough at getting and allocating enough resource in the system to create the mechanisms for humanity to then take the reins into their own hands and to make that change. And I do believe we are starting to see that. We're starting to see really great entrepreneurs, really great individuals hold other people accountable, as well as creating mechanisms for, you know, facilitating this change. Khan Academy is a great example. Khan Academy is one of the greatest online tools for education for things like physics, math, science, the STEM field, so that if you could not afford before, now it's a fair game. If you have access to the internet, you can learn pretty much anything. And that's really exciting, because then it's really up to how much you want it. It really always comes down to that. It's how much you want it, how much you can face yourself in the mirror every day and challenge the man or the woman in the mirror, the individual in the mirror, to achieving what you see in your mind. That's really the big thing that is both exciting and also definitely another of narrative in my first book, The Spark. The main protagonist, his name is Yahya, and there's a scene where he's fighting the greater spirit Deg, this phoenix that lives in this this essentially volcanic vent on the planet of Thir. When he battles with Deg, he goes into this essentially a trance. That a spell of stoning that Deg places on him as they're descending into the magma, and it takes him to a far off moon where he then has to battle in a hand-to-hand type combat another Therian shadow, and who that shadow is and where they come from, the ancestry of Yah, and a bunch of other things, really fits into this exact discussion that we're having, how the battle of the self and the battle that you have with your own mind is really a reflection of how you feel about the world.
Wow, man, your optimism and hope is infectious, I gotta say. But that feels like a really, really great note on which to wrap things up. So everyone go buy either my book or William's book or my games, both of them. And if you want to contribute to GME, buy my t-shirts as well. Links for everything will be in the description below. So yeah, man, thanks very much. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, thank you very much, Josh. It was wonderful wonderful being on.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, follow me on Twitter, or sign up to our mailing list. Thanks a lot to our sponsor, ExpressVPN, the #1 most trusted VPN. Get lightning fast connectivity with servers in 160 locations across 94 countries. Keep your browsing privacy safe with ExpressVPN and get a 35% discount on 12 months of ExpressVPN when you follow the link in the description below. Don't forget my book is now out and available to order on Amazon and on bookshop.org. That's Brexit, the Establishment Civil War. And most importantly, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.